Borderlands 3 has one huge problem that nobody seems to talk about. It's probably the number one thing causing people to hate it, and people need to finally take a stand about it. Now, there's plenty of the things in the game that are cause for alarm or issues of sorts. The loot is simultaneously not rare at all, and yet rarer than ever with anointments and class mods. The story and writing have many issues. Ava exists, the Vault Hunters aren't interesting, the gameplay's too easy, the game doesn't even feel like Borderlands. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. Have you ever noticed that while playing Borderlands 3, Pandora is literally just a dust planet? What the frick, Gearbox? Seriously, you can't show us the diversity of a planet and revert it back to just dirt and dust, making it the most boring and uninteresting planet to land in Borderlands 3. If you're unclear about what I mean, follow me as we take a journey through Pandora, starting with Borderlands 1. So here on Borderlands 1, we load in and admittedly it's just brown dirt. Quickly you make your way through Firestone, and while it's still dirt and rock, at least there's some interesting buildings to look at. Onto Skag Gully, and it's pretty much just big rock mountains and dirt, arid hills, and more dirt, but some mild vegetation and even some water. You go to Sledge's Mine, and it's more of the same rocky desert. Don't worry guys, we're about to get somewhere with this, okay? The Doll Headlands is honestly one of the worst offenders, literally just being a giant dirt lot, but finally, we get to New Haven where the game takes a bit of an environmental shift. Here, the tans turn to brown, and you start seeing some mild vegetation along with flowers and a lot of trash. You get to the Rust Commons, and there's grass all over the place. There's big rocky mountains and even waterfalls surrounding the area. Crom's Canyon takes you through a dark green set of ravines and, who would have guessed, canyons, filled with plenty of vegetation, pools of water, and even a river. Next up is the Trash Coast, and this is actually one of my favorite areas. Even with the trash piles everywhere, this is where you see some real planetary diversity. Dark green grass everywhere with flower patches alongside what appears to be an ocean. And now we go to the Salt Flats, and yeah, we're kinda back to there not being much at all. But right after the Salt Flats comes the Crimson Enclave, and this is where you start to get into a lot of snowy terrain. There's plants, grass, mountains, and snow creating a much more visually appealing area than what was found earlier in the game. The Descent is among one of my other favorite areas, visually at least, where you stumbled upon some of the ancient ruins that have become totally overgrown, and I mean, just look at this. Finally, at Iridian Promontory, and you get to ascend a snowy mountain while it's snowing. Eventually, you reach the vault where you're atop the snowy mountain you've been climbing this whole time and realize you're actually at the top of a volcano. As a bonus area, I'll also mention Jacob's Cove. In this planet of dirt, Jacob's Cove manages to be a deep green forest with multiple story-sized trees, water everywhere, and it's even on the edge of an ocean. Okay, so we just went through pretty much the entirety of Borderlands 1, and there is a lot of dirt, rock, and sand. However, the game does take a shift slowly, starting in a dirty desert, making its way atop a highly vegetated volcano. This planet was obviously a wasteland, but it still manages to show life on Pandora beyond just flat brown ground. Flat brown ground? Flat brown ground. I'd say it's roughly about 86.3% desert, rock, and the color brown, which is conveniently the exact same amount of people watching that aren't subscribed. Proceeding on to Borderlands 2, and we start to really see a big shift on Pandora. The game immediately starts differently. You're on a snowy landscape and get to make your way through snowy and icy caves, caverns, and crevasses. Afterwards, you make it to the Greater Three Horns area. The Divide is filled with snow, rocks, and mountains all around you. Oh yeah, and this giant wasteland off of the cliff. Three Horns Valley is very similar, but with much less snow, though it's still prevalent all around, and especially on the mountaintops. Most of the ground is comprised of dirt and grass, and there's even some ponds and lakes, or maybe an ocean. I'm not too sure what this is supposed to be. You go to Frostburn Canyon, where you guessed, it's a canyon. It is similar to the past areas, but a lot more frozen over. There's still spots of grass and dirt, but one thing I love is the frozen waterfalls surrounding the whole area that you can see pretty much everywhere. It makes you wonder what Frostburn would look like if it was in a much warmer climate. Eventually, we do make our way to the dust, and yeah, it's just straight up dusty brown desert with sand pretty much everywhere. But notice it took this long to get to this point. Advancing to Tundra Express, and it shares similarities to the Three Horns areas. However, there's a decent bit of verticality within the map. You start up in a ravine, either on a hill or in a mountain. There's a river coming down through the map, and there's a lake outside of the map. You can then go wherever Wilhelm is. Seriously, what is this place called? End of the Line. You then go to the end of the line where there's more icy ravines and a large desolate landscape off of the cliff. Sanctuary gets nuked, and you go to the Fridge, which is pretty much the last we see of the snowy tundra. The Fridge is just a frozen over mining facility or something like that. Someone tell me the lore in the comments, I don't know. As you get to the end, you transition into the highlands and the game takes a drastic shift. Gone are the snowy mountains, and instead you're put into this green grassy mountains with rivers, lakes, and plenty of wildlife. Unfortunately, the wildlife is primarily stalkers, so, you know, that sucks. And some threshers, but we don't talk about this one. You do end up spending a significant chunk of the game in the Greater Highlands area. This includes both the Wildlife Preserve and Thousand Cuts, and technically Opportunity, which is man-made. However, it's still cool to see a developed city with skyscrapers in a Borderlands game on Pandora. You then go back to Thousand Cuts, where you get to climb up to the bunker, and it's actually really interesting to see the diversity of the area. You're climbing up grassy mountains, crossing giant ravines, and yet out in the distance you can still see the desert surrounding you. Then we make it to Iridium Blight, which is technically also man-made because all of the purple and deadness around is due to Jack's mining, but it is still a very interesting location. You've got dark gray rocks everywhere you look, with bright purple iridium all throughout the map. Oh, and also a literal volcano you're at, with lava rivers flowing throughout the map. Next up is Sawtooth Cauldron, which is actually a very interesting area to me. You're in what seems to be a very high altitude mountain crag sort of area with very little vegetation aside from grass. There's also a ton of ponds filling out the area and the surrounding areas. However, I ask you this, how did we get here? Take a look at this. There's nothing. It's like this isn't even life. This is a game. My personal headcanon is that this is the mine shaft that leads down under the lake over to the mountains somewhere on the other side. Make it make sense. Anyway, we finally make it to both the Arid Nexus locations, which are very reminiscent of Pandora in Borderlands 1, for obvious reasons, but I like these locations. Finally, we make it to Heroes Pass, where we're pretty much just in the lead up to another volcano, and then the Vault of the Warrior, where we are in the volcano. As a final side note for Borderlands 2, there is the Pirate Booty DLC, which yes, it is a desert, but that's to be expected from a dried up seabed. However, there's still Hater's Folly, which is an extremely colorful and vegetated area, with waterfalls everywhere and a ton of wildlife. The campaign of Carnage is just desert, to be honest, and not much aside from a volcano again in the Forge. This game has a lot of those now that I'm really thinking about it. Hammerlock's Hunt is actually very interesting in its maps. It's not a desert, but it's not at all a forest. It's sort of a barren wasteland with lots of dead vegetation, except there's still grass and water everywhere you go. Also, you ever notice that Hunter's Grotto is literally just a giant cave? Viper's Sanctuary is semi-interesting because it's essentially just the desert version of Pandora, but highly overgrown with all the poison plants, making for an area that is just a desert, yet is somewhat enjoyable to look at. And as a little bonus section, we do have all of the headhunters. This is where everything gets kinda crazy. So going in chronological order, we have the Hollowed Hollow, which shares a lot of similarities to Jacob's Cove from the first game. There's actually a lot of trees and plants everywhere, along with it being on, you guessed it, another volcano. Or, hey, I mean, maybe it's just natural spawning lava, but either way. Next up is Gluttony Gulch, which has a nice fall palette. The trees are orange, there's leaves all over the ground, and the whole area is surrounded by a giant lake. Marcus's Mercenary Day shop takes us atop big snowy peaks with pine trees everywhere. There's plenty of frozen lakes, ponds, and waterfalls, and there's also some nice little gingerbread houses to fit the theme. Wham Bam Island manages to put us on a tropical beach island where there's plenty of knockoff palm trees, beach huts, and some fun in the sun. Also, this place holds the record for the most volcanoes in one map, with a staggering 6 volcanoes surrounding the island, with potentially 3 other that are inactive, or they could just be mountains. For the last headhunter, we have the Rock Cut Distillery, which is just a somber little island in a lake. It's green. Finally, we have only one more area of significance, which is Digistruct Peak. If you haven't done so before, I do highly recommend taking a look outside of the map and really taking it in. It takes place on a ginormous desert cliff covered in snow. Outside, you can see miles and miles and miles of desert mountains and what are essentially mile-high stalagmites. Okay, we're done with Borderlands 2. That took way too long, but hopefully it'll make this next point just that much more impactful. So we actually get to Borderlands 3 on Pandora, and it's dirt. Wait, but if you go to Ascension Bluff, there's... No, that's still just dirt. Well, maybe Carnivora has dirt. Oh, Pandora? Sure, I like a little dirt. Alright, that's good. Okay, that's good. I'd like a little bit of green or something, but it's fine. Okay, that's good. That's fine. That's enough dirt!
Wait, it's all dirt. Always has been.
Yeah, there's literally nothing to Pandora here. Even Borderlands 1 had more going for it on Pandora than this did. The games have proven that Pandora, while being primarily desert, actually has a lot of interesting diversity, wildlife, and things that aren't dirt. So why do we keep making Pandora ugly? Even the movie has Pandora just being essentially a Tatooine of Borderlands. Credit where credit's due though. Stormblind Complex is actually the most diverse part of Pandora in Borderlands 3. Mostly just because it has snow on there, but also it does have a lake surrounding it, so that's something at least. It actually feels somewhat like Borderlands 2, plus it has Axton, so that just makes it that much better.
To be fair though, this is kind of a problem that Borderlands 3 just has. It tends to lock the visual style of each planet, and they never stray from that. Pandora is just dust, Eden 6 is just green, etc, etc.
So what have we learned today, class? Borderlands 3 sucks. But not because of the reason people always talk about. No, it goes much, much deeper than that. Pandora is boring and ugly. And that's all for today, guys. If you enjoy the content, please drop a like, hit the subscribe button, and comment your favorite Pandora location throughout the games. Also, a huge shout out to my channel members. You guys help keep this whole operation going, and I love you so much. So special thanks to Kaya, Starkiller with a 4, Alpha BO1, Tyler, Guy Oliveira, Benny, Caesar Aeroglue, Crow's Dog, Lil Gas Mask, Raji Flaps, Shrubbery, Coda's Garden, and Lolo, or as I know him, Lobster. You guys are the absolute best, and I hope you all have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, or night. Peace out. Okay, Borderlands 3 sucks, bye.